Today we're going to talk about how to write linear equations. Before we do that though, we have to go over the three different forms. The first form is slope-intercept. Slope-intercept is when you take your equation and you solve it for y. If the equation is solved for y, you can tell right away what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. Your slope is always the coefficient of x and the y-intercept is the constant. The second form is standard form. Standard form occurs when x and y are on one side of the equal sign and the constant is on the other side. You want to make sure that both a and b are integers, which means that neither a nor b can be a fraction, and that a is positive. Then we have point slope. Point slope is typically used to get to either standard or slope-intercept. We don't usually use point slope for graphing. Point slope requires a slope and a point, and it's y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. X sub 1 and y sub 1 are going to be a given point, and m, of course, is a slope. So let's go ahead and start by looking at an example. Suppose that you're given a slope. Let's say our slope is 2/3. And then you're given a y-intercept of 4. And you're asked to write the equation of the line. Now, given a slope and an intercept, it makes sense of the three, the one that you're going to choose is slope-intercept. So I'm going to say it's y equals, my slope is 2/3, x, my y-intercept is 4. So the equation I come up with is y equals 2/3 x plus 4. All I had to do was plug in my slope of 2/3 and my y-intercept of 4. Now, usually when we write equations of a line, we're going to put them in slope-intercept form, so a question like this would be pretty easy to answer. You just plug in your values. Now, let's look at a different type of question, one that maybe requires a little bit of work. Let's say instead of given a slope and a y-intercept, you're given a slope and a point. So let's say we've got a slope of 2/3, and let's say we have a point, and our point is 3, -1. So here I have a point, and a slope. Well, of the three forms, if I have a point and a slope, the one that makes sense to use would be point slope. And then I could take my point slope and I can manipulate it until I had it in slope-intercept form. So let's go ahead and try that. Point slope is y minus y sub 1. Well, your y sub 1 is coming from the given point, so your x sub 1 is going to be the 3. Your y sub 1 is going to be the -1. So your x sub 1 and your y sub 1 are going to be the given points. Let me erase this so you can see this a little bit better. My pen does not want to cooperate. So let me do this. Let's say y sub 1. So here's your x sub 1 and your y sub 1. So go over here. I'm going to plug in my -1 for my y sub 1 equals 2/3 times x minus my x sub 1, which is a 3. Now this is point slope. What I need to do next is I need to clean it up and then decide how I'm going to solve it for y. So that minus minus is going to become a +1. So it's y plus 1, 2/3 times x minus 3. Now, slope-intercept is where I solve for y. So what I need to do next is take the 2/3 and distribute it across, and then I'm going to have to move my 1. So let me go ahead and distribute the 2/3 so you get 2/3 x. And then 2/3 times a -3 is just going to be a -2. You can multiply across and get a -6 because 2 times -3 is -6. And then 3 times 1 is 3, which will reduce down to -2. So I'll get y plus 1 on the right-hand side. And then all I have to do is subtract 1 from both sides, and I get y equals 2/3 x minus 3. And that is my answer. So if you're given a slope and a point, it kind of makes sense to start with point slope and then take that and manipulate it to get to slope-intercept. Now let's look at one other example. Let's say instead of a point and a slope, I'm given 2 points. And here, if you look at the different forms, You don't really see one that uses just 2 points. This uses a point and a slope. This uses the slope and the y-intercept. This doesn't really use a slope or points at all. This is going to require getting to by some manipulation. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let's say our point is 2, 4, and let's say 6, 8. So if I have points 2, 4, and 6, 8, and I need to figure out which one I want to use, and look at the two here, they both have slope in them, so I'm probably going to be good by starting by finding the slope. So let's go ahead and find the slope first. Anytime you're given 2 points, go ahead and find your slope, but that's probably going to be the easiest thing to do. So remember, slope will be the change in the y's over the change in the x's, or the difference in the y's over the difference in the x's. So I'm going to do 8 minus 4. I'm using this 8 and this 4. Now this was the 8. I chose to use this point first in my numerator. So when I go to do the denominator, I need to start with this point first as well. So here I'm going to have 6 minus 2. So my slope will end up being 8 minus 4 is 2, and 6 minus 2 is 4. 2/4 or 1/2. So now I have a couple of different ways I could go. I have a slope now. So here I have a slope and I have a point, so I could use point slope. Or I can look at it as I have a slope and I have some points that I could use with slope intercept. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do this problem. First, let's do the obvious. I have a slope and a point that I can use. So let's do this. Let's use this first point. Let's look at this first point, and this is our slope, and we're going to plug it into point slope. So I'm going to have y minus, my y sub 1 will be 4, equals, my slope was 1/2, times x minus my x sub 2. And then I could take this and I can manipulate it because I want to solve it for y. And I have 1/2 x minus 1 because half of 2 is 1. And then I'd add 4 to both sides. So y would equal 1/2 x plus 3. So that would be my equation. So if I have 2 points, I could find my slope, and then I could use point slope. Just use the slope. It wouldn't matter which point I use, but I could just use the first one, just simply because it's first. Plug it into my formula, and I'll get y equals 1/2 x plus 3. Now there is a different way to work it, and I want to show you this way because some of you will probably prefer this method over the point slope method. So instead of using point slope, what I'm going to do is use slope intercept to begin with. Let me go and grab a red pen. So slope intercept says y equals mx plus b. Well, we calculate the slope to be a half. So I'll put in my half. So y equals 1/2 x plus b. Okay. Now, what I have to do is figure out what the heck is b. Well, to figure out what b is, I'm going to choose one of these points. Again, it doesn't matter which point that I choose. So I'll just choose the first one. And when you choose a point, what it's saying to you is that when x is 2, y is 4. When x is 6, y is 8. So this is an input, this is an output. So I should be able to plug these values into my equation to figure out what b is. So here x is 2 when y is 4. So if y is 4, 4 equals 1/2 times 2 for x, plus b. And then all I have to do, now I have an equation that has just b in it to solve, is solve this thing for b. So 4 equals, half of 2 is 1. And so I subtract 1 from both sides, and I find out that b is 3. Now once I have my y-intercept, all I have to do is go back and plug it in here, and I'll have my answer. So my answer would be y equals 1/2 x plus 3, which was the same thing that we got a while ago. So there's 2 different ways to write your equation. You could start with point slope and solve it for y, or you could do a little more work, use slope intercept and use one of the points for x and y, and then put it all back together. Now let's look at one more example, because occasionally, instead of asking for things in slope-intercept, they may ask you to put something in standard form. In standard form, you cannot go straight to standard form. Standard form is going to have to happen by either beginning with slope-intercept or with point slope. So let's look at an example of that. Let's say I have 2 points. We'll go ahead and practice that again. Let's say the points are 6, 3, and -2, we'll go with 6. Okay, so I've got 2 points, and this time I want to write my answer in standard form. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my slope. So my slope is going to equal the difference in my y's over the difference in the x's. So I'm going to start with a second point and say 6 minus 3. And then I have to start with a -2 because I started here first. So -2 minus 6. So my slope is going to be 3 over a -8. So my slope is a -3/8. Okay, so now we've got some fractions to deal with, but that'll be okay. This may be a little complicated, but we'll be fine. I have a slope, I have a point, so why don't we just go ahead and use point slope. So we'll just use this first point right here, just because it's first, no other reason other than that. And let's switch colors. We're going to do point slope. So we're going to do y minus, my y sub 1 is 3, equals a -3/8 times x minus 6. Okay? Now, one of the things about standard form is that you can't have fractions as coefficients. So I'll look at this right here, and I've got a -3/8 times something. I need to figure out a way to get rid of this 8. The easiest way to get rid of your 8 is to multiply everything by that denominator. So I'm going to do that next. Now watch what I'm doing. I'm going to take 8. I'm going to put this whole thing in parentheses, so I'm going to multiply this whole thing by 8. Equals 8 times a -3/8 times x minus 6. Okay, so here I'm going to have 8y equals 24. I'm sorry, 8y minus 24 equals, it does not want to cooperate. My 8's will cancel here. Now, since this cancels, this is now a 1. So I'm not going to be multiplying any of this inside of here by 8. This got rid of my denominator. So I've got a -3 times x minus 6. Then I'll distribute my 3, minus 3x plus 18. And I've got 8y, and that went a little haywire. Erase all that. (8y minus 24). Now, all that's left to do is get x and y together. Constants on the other side. Remember, in standard form, that a has to be positive, so I'm going to add 3x to both sides. So I've got 3x plus 8y. I'm going to add 24 to the other side and get 42. And now I have standard form. And that's your answer. Okay, so we've talked about ways to write linear equations in slope-intercept, standard, and point-slope form. Make sure you understand that point-slope typically is used to get to either standard or slope-intercept. And most of the time, your answer is going to be written in slope-intercept form. So go over this, study it. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in class.